Welcome to Notes on a Painting. Notes on a Painting is a podcast by artist Olivia Kemp and art historian Esme Garlake. Together each week we will discuss a painting that one of us has chosen and researched. Our choices of painting will reflect where our tastes differ and overlap across the history of art.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Still in Oxford. You're still in Scotland. The painting that I've chosen today is by Albrecht Dürer, and it's either called The Large Piece of Turf or The Great Piece of Turf. It was painted in 1503. It's a very small painting, watercolor and gouache painting on paper, and it's about 41 by 32 centimeters.
Should I get my big ruler out?
Please do. Yes. I'm so happy that you have that.
41.
That's quite okay, so that's
42.
okay, so that's the third, yeah, 41 is the height.
41 is,
Actually quite big.
yeah,
I think it's because it's so detailed.
yeah.
So yeah, and it's housed in the Albertina in Vienna. So the sources for this are quite a few. Obviously, the Wikipedia page. Then there are a couple of books. So Dürer and His Culture by Dagmar Eichberger from 1998. Um, Splendor in the Grass, The Powers of Nature and Art in the Age of Dürer is a chapter in a book by Larry Silver and Pamela Smith that came out in 2002. And that's a really interesting book. It's called Merchants and Marvels, and it's about like the start of trade and lots of thinking about animals and plants and stuff by Renaissance artists in like a global context. It's really interesting. Um, then Green Worlds in Early Modern Italy is an edited book that came out in 2019. Would you like to describe the painting, please?
Yes. I feel like if I asked you to describe this painting, you would complain.
Oh, I always complain at every description, but I would especially complain with this one, it's true. But you're really good at descriptions, so I have full faith.
Yeah, failed now.
Flattery, flattery.
Okay, so for me, this is kind of like looking at Van Gogh sunflowers or something. It's a painting, yeah, it's very well known, and I've seen it a lot. Um, It is, as it says, like it is a piece of turf. Although in my head, turf is just grass, and this is more
Mm,
than just grass. You've got the ground in the extreme foreground, and then plants, including grasses
mm,
in the painting itself. And you've got large leaves and dandelion heads and grass seed flat like heads and small plants to the back. And it's sitting in this like white space, which gives it sort of like a surreal quality because it's
yeah.
the ground kind of fades out and there's no background behind the grass itself. It's really
Mm.
a study in detail. Um, I actually had a really interesting conversation with my gallerist, like, or the person who runs the gallery that I work with in London about this painting.
Mm.
Some years ago, we were talking about it and about whether he sat in front of a piece of grass, whether it's
Mhm.
using knowledge you have about nature and creating something that feels believable, like how a work like that is made and why it's made, and it's really interesting because I think at first you just assume it's a study of a piece of grass and it's like you cut the grass off and stick it in the studio and or you sit in the field and paint it. But
Mm.
I don't know, I'm just questioning that and like
Yeah.
whether it's, you know, a beautiful display of skill and like botanical knowledge or something
Mm.
different, whether there's imagination involved and what to what degree that is and what the
Yeah.
purpose of making a work like that is. Anyway, that's off on a sidebar. It's obviously very rich in greens and the obviously the ground foreground. It's yeah, the more you zoom in, the more beautiful and detailed it is. The watercolor element of it really
Mm.
comes to the fore when you zoom right in, and you can see the slight tonal variations in where the water and the brush
Yeah.
has got down. It's yeah, it's a really stunning painting. It is definitely a symphony in green. And there's also quite, when you really get zoomed in, there's quite, and like that kind of forest green that's like a bluey green that no one really
Yeah,
ever wants to use for anything, is in this painting in these like highlight touches,
yeah,
which is really interesting because I think they always say green's a really difficult color to paint with, and
mm.
it's very true. And this forest green, it's usually it was called that on my old watercolor set. I don't know what it's always called, but that
Yeah,
really useless green that isn't the color of a tree is actually used as highlight
mhm.
this sort of acidic turquoisey green. And it's really interesting to see it used because it's usually people have such an aversion to it. And it's really beautifully used. And it kind of gives it that makes me again question the observation of it and
Yeah,
what to what degree it's playful and to what degree it's scientific, I guess.
yeah.
But yeah, that's my
I knew you'd do a great job.
I went off on a sidebar.
No, but it is one of those paintings that you, I think people love it because it's of something seemingly normal that you would overlook,
Mm,
but then there's so much there, and that those are some of the best paintings, I think.
yeah.
And yeah, you kind of think, oh, how could we have a long conversation about turf? Or, well, yeah, grasses, weeds, some dirt on the floor, but it really does open up so many questions. So we'll just touch on some today because honestly, with Dürer, it's like, yes, he also, this is just one among so many of
It
works
is.
like
And
that.
people have, certain art historians have just dedicated entire careers to tiny facets of Dürer's life. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, we couldn't claim to
No. Oh my gosh,
scratch the
definitely not.
surface.
No. So, yeah, I've decided that I'm going to do like Dura's biography very briefly because, and only really up to, in much detail, up to this point, up to about 1503. To start with, like where he was born and his early life, he was born in Nuremberg, on the 21st of May, 1471. And there's like loads of information about his father and his mother and his grandfather and all of this. But and there are some paintings that he did of them. There's an amazing drawing of his mother as an old woman, which was really cool. But yeah, his father was a goldsmith who was originally from Hungary. And his parents had 18 children together, but only three survived. Albrecht and his two brothers, Hans, who became a painter, and Andres, who took over the family business as a master goldsmith. And thinking as well about the overlap between goldsmithing and printing.
Mm,
At the time, that was really key, like you being able to use metals and fine points. So Dürer was first trained in goldsmithing and drawing under his father, and there's a self-portrait drawing dated to 1484, which is one of the earliest surviving children's drawings that we have, which is really beautiful and sweet and crazily good.
yeah. Yeah.
So I think his father wanted him to go into the goldsmithing, stay in that, but because he was such a talent for drawing, he in 1486, when he was 15 years old, he joined the workshop as an apprentice to the painter and printmaker Michael Wohlgemuth. And it was a very large workshop in Nuremberg. Um, and there's again, I'll just keep saying like there are just so many paintings and drawings by Dürer through his life, but there's a really amazing portrait that he did of Wohlgemuth as an older man, which he painted in 1516, so much, much later.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, that's kind of moving that we have all these records of these people that he was surrounded with through
yeah.
his life. Um, so Nuremberg at the time, it was a very important and wealthy city. It was a center of book publishing, printmaking, and trade with strong connections to Italy, especially Venice, which was just a short distance on the other side of the Alps. Um, his godfather was Anton Koberger, who had moved from goldsmithing to printing and publishing around the time that Dürer was born. And he actually became the most successful publisher in Germany. So again, there are all of these connections that Dürer had in Nuremberg. And yeah, I've been looking at late 15th century prints in Venice, and the thing that comes up at that time is that Nuremberg and Venice were really like the two key centers in Europe at that time
Right.
for printing. So it's unsurprising that someone as talented as Dürer at such an early age with these connections didn't end up being a printmaker as well as a
Yeah.
painter. Um, so he had there was this a kind of extended gap year travel from 1490 to 1494, and he worked in different artist workshops in different cities, including Strasbourg, Frankfurt, Basel, and the Netherlands, places in the Netherlands. He returned to Nuremberg aged 23 in 1494, like I said, and he soon married Agnes Frey, and it was a marriage that had been arranged while he was away. Um, I enjoyed reading about their marriage, because, well, I mean, this isn't very nice, but it was not a very happy one, apparently. But I enjoyed the fact that there are these letters from him which call her an old crow, and his friends are also kind of ranting about her. I mean, maybe poor woman, actually. Now I feel bad saying that. I enjoyed it, but I just like the art historical gossip, I
Yeah.
guess. Um, so after 3 months of this is bad as well. After 3 months of marriage, Jura took off for a year to go to Italy. So he traveled over the Alps, and there are some amazing watercolor sketches that he made as he was traveling. He arrived in Venice, where he saw the works of and apparently met Giovanni Bellini.
Right.
And he also saw the engravings by Antonio del Pollaiolo, Lorenzo di Credi, and Andrea Mantegna, all of whom are amazing artists with
Mm.
a lot, like they were really at their peak at this point. And he also met the Venetian printmaker Jacopo de Barbari, and that was very significant also for later with his printmaking. He also visited Padua and Mantua. Um, and like, I guess he was also bringing with him the styles and techniques from Germany as well, and from Northern Europe. So it was really about exchange. Not it wasn't imitating, but it was exchanging ideas.
Yeah.
Um, he returned to Nuremberg in 1495, where he opened his own workshop. You had to be married to do this, apparently. The plot thickens.
Okay.
Um, do you know, I've written so much about his engravings and stuff, but I'm just going to leave it as he was making these crazy and absolutely amazing series of woodcuts and engravings, large scale. And I encourage everybody to look them up because they're really cool. And they do actually relate to like the detailed, the trees and the grass and the natural imagery in the woodcuts really do it does relate a lot to this painting that we're looking at today as well. In 1500, he made perhaps his most famous painting, which is a self-portrait in which he basically casts himself as Christ. Agnes must have hated this guy. Like, he sounds really annoying if you're
Let's
not
see
getting
how
into him.
topical someone casting themselves as Christ.
I'd be like, God, this guy. But I have to say, having seen it last year in Munich, it's so beautiful.
Mm.
Again, the detail that we see in this painting is transferred into the oil painting of this self-portrait. And yeah, it's like the fine lines of his hair in particular are just so beautiful. Um, and so the workshop was known by this point as having a really high quality works. And there's lots of surviving drawings, paintings, including this painting, and also a young painting of a young hare in 1502, which is quite famous as well.
Yeah.
Um, so just before having a look in more detail at this particular painting, I thought I would just outline like some of the key themes, I guess, of this like cultural moment. And I've looked mostly to Dagmar Eichberger's book, Dürer and His Culture, for this. I mean, it was published in 1998, so obviously there's been a lot more research done since then.
Yeah.
But I think it was quite good for just like laying the groundwork of what was going on in this period. And she really emphasized that Dürer was an artist who was very aware of aware of the fact that he was living through a lot of transformations in society. And that I guess that's part of his autobiographical writings. And also the choice of just a whole range of secular and religious themes and subject matters. So yeah, 1500 really, and around that time was a huge time for
Mm.
Europe, as most people know that. Um, but yeah, so collecting was one of the things that really transformed how art was made and seen. So it was no longer, gradually over the course of the 15th century, it was no longer just the realm of kings and princes. It was increasingly wealthy and well-educated people. So that includes merchants, humanists, scholars, lawyers, diplomats, courtiers, and they were all collecting artworks. And depending on the amount of money you had, that could be collecting paintings. That also prints became this other. Some say that prints were, the really intricate prints by famous artists at the time were actually as expensive and valuable as altarpieces at the time.
Wow.
But it really varies, like in terms of where, like who the artist is, what size it is, because you also have like prints that ordinary people would have been able to access
Mm.
as well. Um, but yeah, printing is another huge development of this period. And you also have to think that like we're in the stage in Europe, and particularly significantly for like Northern and Western Europe, this is pre-Reformation. So
Right.
after the Reformation, you start to have, even in like countries that are still Catholic, like Italy, you start to have a lot more clamping down on images and the type of imagery. So at this time, some print historians have argued that this moment of like around 1500 and a bit earlier in those decades before and after are the moments where it's really like able to be in its most experimental form. And yeah, like I said, Jacopo de Barbari is one printmaker in Venice who, when you look at his artwork, his prints, they're just amazing and wild, and you can see like the line work as well. That
Mm.
it's just that it's not really like a system. It's really the artists using this new technique to just, or maybe a more established technique, but in really experimental ways. At the same time, obviously, a few years before Columbus had landed in the Americas, and contact with the Americas was growing, and artists were playing a really key part in documenting and interpreting that contact, and the trade with other countries, like with India, with the Ottoman Empire, things like that during this period are growing as well. I guess all of this comes together in a way, with like the naturalistic studies of nature and the proto-scientific study of nature. Well, can think about it more with this painting specifically. It raises a lot of like tensions in a way. I think helpful tensions between like art and nature, between observation and imagination.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, there's also a question of whether Dürer actually like dug up a whole patch of grass and took it back to the studio.
Mhm.
I've got a note that like the roots are also visible in it. And it almost seems like he could have cleared some of the soil away so that the roots were then visible. Again, thinking about like how is this an artist who's trying to understand how the natural world or how particular plants work in a
Mm.
kind of proto-scientific way. Um, Lots of people that when I was reading this, and they say it on the Smart History short video, but elsewhere as well, they say lots of people talk about the perspective of it as if you're like lying down on the ground or you're looking. Um, I don't particularly get that, but I guess they're talking about like a closeness,
Yeah.
like you're really in it. Um, but it's also strange because it is against a white background. So there's I guess it's a little bit, it reminds me a bit of the Mansour painting of the turkey, where the turkey is really, really naturalistic and
Mm.
so closely observed, but then the surroundings are quite abstracted almost, or like it's
Well, I guess
floating.
then Jura's got like two choices if he wasn't to leave the background white, the
Yeah,
choice is either to have the detail go the whole way back,
which would be,
which
yeah,
would be really difficult,
yeah,
and I think probably at a certain point the presence of the paint versus the presence of the object you're painting would take over
yeah,
because of the level of detail required.
yeah,
And then you have the same issue if you fade it, like because the eye naturally focuses on one thing and everything else
yeah,
around it is more blurred. But then again, the painterly aspect of having things blur as they go back distracts you from the naturalistic detail that he may be
yeah,
trying to achieve. So I think I
yeah.
don't know. Like, I don't know if that's like trying to be surreal or if that's really just trying to
Oh, it's honing
focus
in,
on the
isn't it? It's
detail.
like
Yeah.
trying to,
That-
I guess what one argument is that that aspect of isolating a quote unquote natural specimen, it's
mm,
like it's the same kind of impulse that we then see with the Enlightenment of like separating botanical specimens and like
yeah.
really classifying them. I don't think that that is entirely what's happening here. Like, I think it's a study. I think he's interested in it. You just start to get into the whole debate about like, is it good to classify
Mm.
nature? How is that a violent thing to do? And how is that like what colonial power was based on that, on like classifying and like it's a particular Western like Enlightenment view. And I think we're in a moment now where it's like so fraught.
See,
Um,
I was thinking about it in the opposite way. I was thinking about it,
mm,
um, but how when you're an artist and you've drawn something and it's not if it's not accurate,
mm,
there's a lot of weight on whether something is accurate or from observation. And I don't
mm,
think like Dürer can make a painting like that. And I don't know, I would have thought there would have been some kind of judgment if it was seen as being from imagination.
mm.
Um, I don't know.
You mean from us today?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
people are interested in accuracy or
Yeah.
want to know the reasons behind that choice for a lack of
Mm,
accuracy, like
mm,
what your educated decision making was if you've
mm,
chosen to do something in a way that is not scientifically accurate.
mm,
A case in point, which is really like complete sidebar, but I once heard a story from a gallery about they were like on the cusp of selling this painting,
mm,
and the buyer like absolutely loved it but could not buy it because of the type of bricks and mortar that had been done on the painting of the building. It wasn't accurate because they owned a building firm and they know how those bricks should have been laid and
mm.
they couldn't buy it. So it's like I don't know. I feel like when you
Yeah.
made a choice, when you made a non-accurate choice, like there that is questioned now, and
Mm,
not necessarily in a bad way. Like if you have a good reason to not be accurate, then that's fine. But if you
mm,
don't, then that's seen as like,
mm.
well, maybe you're just not skilled enough. Yeah, see, for me, detail and accuracy are so bound together
Mm.
in choice and like if you
Yeah,
make
it's so
something detailed,
interesting.
is it accurate? Why is it detailed if it's not accurate?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah, I think also it's about taste, isn't it? It's like that person not wanting to buy the painting because it's not accurate. Like it would be, I think, a bit of a hard push to say be like, oh, it's all bound up in like Enlightenment ideals and everything. It's like
Yeah.
no, it's actually often it's taste. Obviously, taste is cultural and social and historical, but you also end up moving far away from like what was Dürer doing. Do you know what I mean? Like I have to kind of pull myself back in and be like, hold on. Okay, it's 1503. Dürer is painting this patch of grass? Like, what's going on?
Well, that's why my thinking is he's painting this patch of grass. It's incredibly detailed.
Yeah.
The big question for me is it accurate or is it detailed? Is he
Mm,
being artistic with detail or
mm.
is he being scientific with it?
The thing that makes me think he's gone taken some artistic license here is that amazing turquoise
Mm,
forest green. Like he's clearly like also color, interestingly, like looking at his, I mentioned, oh, there's a lot of roots and trees and plants in his prints, but obviously here, like the color is what's so amazing as
yeah,
well. And you
yeah.
don't have that in the prints. So I also think it's just regardless of like how you want to judge it, it's like it is an artist who is really interested in the natural world.
Mm,
Like it just is. Um, and I think also, like you say, if he had added a background, it would be like it's already quite chaotic. Chaotic in a very serene way, but
mhm,
there's a kind of disorganized randomness, seeming randomness to it. Um, and I think yeah, like you say, the background kind of allows you to just settle and focus, and like your eye is then guided around it. And
mm.
I mean, I want to ask you about like, because you do this reminded me of like, and you sent me a picture that you did what, like nearly 10 years ago, a drawing 10 years ago
Yeah,
of
yeah.
it was an, was it an homage?
Yeah, it was. I was thinking about Dürer's turf and whether
Yeah.
it was a direct drawing of turf
Yeah.
or whether it was using, visual language that he'd already accrued and knowledge he'd accrued to put together a
Mm.
beautiful painting and have it feel very believable.
Mm.
Because mine wasn't, I did a version, nothing like Dura's, but I
Mm.
did a version for myself because I was on a residency in Italy and I'd almost felt like I'd drawn everything under the sun. So I started just like staring into hedgerows
Yeah.
and thinking like much more small. Um, and yeah, mine was put together from, things I'd seen and things I'd imagined and put together to sort of create this structure of
Mm.
grasses and plants on some ground.
Wow.
And I was just
Yeah.
thinking about that Dura and yeah, when you build a visual language that is detailed, how much you can play with the idea of accuracy is always fascinating to me. And whether Dürer was incredibly knowledgeable about plants, but put together this composition. And
Mm.
it's like when you draw a tree from imagination, you should. I mean, I've taught myself about by other people, and this is what I've learned and continue to consider is that nature, when you are drawing or painting it, will always be doing the unexpected thing. The tree won't go, and
Yeah.
sticks just coming off a stick. It's going to do the wild and crazy. So try and think, you know,
Wow.
be make an idiosyncratic move with that branch. Like don't, if you're going one
Huh.
direction, maybe
Yeah.
bring back it, double back because. And the same with grasses and plants. Have the leaves. Think about them curling and shriveling, and think about them going off in a different direction.
Mm.
And that's what gives nature the chaos that you were referring to is very
Yeah.
important. And I think once I mean, I did not master anything by any means, but once you understand something about that, then you
Mm.
can play with it a little bit. And when you're a master like Dürer was, not me, Dürer, when you
Yeah.
when you're a master like Dürer, then you can really think about what you're put. However, that's what I mean about the detail and the accuracy, and that fascinated me. Like really,
Mm.
whether this is just someone really sitting in front of a piece of grass and doing that, or whether this is someone who is incredibly visually intelligent and is putting together something that feels very real and
Mm.
scientific almost.
Yeah.
But is it scientific or is it, an incredible piece of imagination?
Yeah, and also scientific, like um it can be and it doesn't have to be as well. Like I think there are so many it's a bit like I know obviously very different period, but like the Rachel Roish
Mm,
Still Lives, they can be moral allegories. They can be um at the same time like signifiers of basically how skilled she is as an
Yeah.
artist. Like the illusion of it obviously is big, but also like the scientific knowledge or the botanical knowledge that is required to
I don't think there's anything less important about the scientific. I just
yeah.
enjoy questioning when people are as skilled as Dürer,
Yeah.
whether
Well,
that artistic has come into play because he's an
yeah,
artist as well, you know, not just a
exactly. And I think for it's one aspect of this, which I find important to remember, and it helps to ground us in this moment, is the religious implications for this painting, which seems like what you're talking about because it's a patch of grass. Um, but so I have a quote from Dürer's notebooks, which says, art is embedded in nature, and the art it is for the artist who has the insight to extract it. Thus, beauty lies even in humble, perhaps ugly things, and the ideal, which bypasses or improves on nature, may not be truly beautiful in the end. So I feel like the key part for me is it's the ideal. Like it's at this time, like the artists took from the natural world or from
mm,
anything that was the material world and could create the ideal,
mm,
which is improving on nature. And this was a tension at the time, like, should the artist, and some thought it was really blasphemous to think of the artist as a god or as being able to improve on nature, because if God created the world, then
mm,
nature is in God's image. And so how can you make it better? Or is making it seem the ideal, is that doing a service to God as well? So there's all of these very this is philosophical debates and questions that had been going on for centuries and all of that. So we won't go into that. Your via around that. But I think, for example, there was the Albertus Magnus, who was actually canonized in, I think, the 30s, which makes me laugh. But he was a 13th century theologian and philosopher, and he's seen as responsible for, or as a key figure for bringing Aristotle back, like Aristotle's ideas about observing the natural world and observing the world. And
mm.
Albertus Magnus was very closely studied by the humanists of the Renaissance. And he did a lot of studies on plants. Like he was really interested in observing plants and trees and animals. And but it was, he was a theologian, so it was all grounded in Christianity. I think like if Dürer could, like you say, master the natural world, like almost, I'm not saying that this patch of grass that he's turned it into an ideal, but if you look at some of the engravings that he made of the Madonna and Child, and where she's like seen in the outdoor setting, and you zoom in and you see, or if it was in real life, you just look closely. That's what people at the time would have done.
The
You'd
traditional Zoom.
yes, the OG zoom function, move closer. You see that the Virgin Mary is like surrounded by these amazingly detailed, and they do actually remind me quite a lot of your drawings, I have to say, like the because it's the black and white as well in these prints. It's like that real, and like unlike in this study where there's more of a blank background, often it can be really quite busy and like there's lots and lots going on in these prints. And so there's like the detail, you can see how it links to this painting,
Yeah.
especially. Um, and then yeah, there's one last one to mention of the Madonna images, which is a drawing and watercolor. It's called Madonna Among a Multitude of Animals. And
That's a great title.
it's so funny. It's the multitude. The use of the word multitude is like, um, but yeah, like you can looking at that one as well, you see how, because it's in color as well, I think. And it was painted around the time that this watercolor painting was made. You really get a sense of how this study could then be taken and used in lots of different ways. And obviously, it's that classic thing of like realistic versus naturalistic. Is like, you've got like saints in the background. Like it's not necessarily realistic, but it's naturalistic. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Actually, I did it here. I had this like drawing of a tree stump that I'd like mostly done from observation, and I put it in like 8 drawings, like larger works.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
For a while,
Art
it became
historians
like a
love that stuff.
fixture.
That's like the who's the one who was it Clara Peters who uses the vase in like loads of different
Yeah. Or
yeah.
Bassano, Jacopo Bassano,
Hmm.
with the animals that are like copy paste in every painting.
That's so cool. Well, art historians are going to love looking at your drawings in a few years because they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, it's the same tree stump." Like that's the bread and butter of art history. It's like,
Love
oh,
that
love
stuff.
it, love it. So yeah, then I mean, I guess like it's also um just finally last bits. He went back to Italy, so he had like 2 key trips to Italy.
Mm.
And he went back to Italy in 1505, so a couple of years after he made this study. And he actually stayed in Venice from 1506 to 1507. And I wanted to mention it particularly because his presence there had a real impact on so many Italian painters and lots that I study for my research. But they included Lorenzo Lotto, who we looked at last season. And I realized so he painted that fresco of St. Bridget in 1523. And obviously, there was lots of trees and lots of animals. And I thought, oh, like, Dürer has like rippled out there.
Definitely.
And in the book about green worlds in Italy, there's a chapter by April Ottinger who about Lorenzo Lotto's depictions of trees, and Dürer is mentioned in it. So the thing I love about it, and the reason that this has been so long, probably, is because I just love how like it really like looking at Dürer just opens up all these connections with all of these artists.
Yeah.
But also there's something so appealing for us today.
Thank you for joining us this week. We can never be 100% sure of the accuracy of historical events. However, the information we are providing is based on our own research. If there's a painting you'd like to hear us discuss, please let us know on social media. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for weekly episodes.